Hello, and welcome to Push and Pull, a medical massage podcast brought to you by the team at The Tall and Short of It. I'm your host, Justin, LMT, and co-owner of Touch of Phoenix Elite Massage of Reading, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending your time. Let's have an interesting conversation about modesty. I think that's an interesting next place to go. When putting this episode together, I was thinking, where could we go? What would be an interesting setup for a conversation? And one thing that came up this week was the concern of modesty for a female client, and like even male clients. It just happened to be with a female client. And the ways that you can give them the privacy, comfort, and modesty that they deserve while also working in a perfectly safe, effective, and corrective manner also. So I think that's going to be the angle that we're coming from today. I have a good case in mind. I have a great client in mind that we can talk about today. And it should really help us explore what our options are to maybe overcome like our own you would just say like your own self-consciousness or your own worries or like hang-ups even. And I think it's a field where that can happen very easily. I think it's a field where if there's not proper, open, and clear communication between the practitioner and the client, I think signals can get crossed very easily, and that's a realm that we don't want to be in. So that's what today's conversation is going to be about, is how can we protect modesty, protect our clients from like unclear or like mixed signals to keep them perfectly comfortable and perfectly safe. Now, the client that I have in mind brings us back to the previous episode where we are setting up what this podcast can and probably will be about, most likely, is like initial failures, how we learned from them, and then how we implemented the new tools then to like redouble our efforts and then get like a successful treatment. So this is such a case. Now, in the spirit of protecting privacy rights, all that kind of stuff, no real names will be used. It'll all be fictional, but the case itself will be real. And that should be needless to say going forward, but I'm going to say it every time just to clarify. So, modesty for clients. Let's get into it. So I had Wonder Woman present to the office. She had been spending some time away from fighting crime and protecting our rights and freedoms, and she was working a different job. She was doing one-on-one conversations with clients, and she came in presenting with significant like right shoulder pain, and had a front right hip discomfort and a back left side hip discomfort as well. And as we talked about it, we learned that it was due to, well, let's not make any diagnoses. We just learned that we can attribute the symptoms to a number of just like repetitive things that she was doing over the course of the day. So she was sitting a lot. Her arms tended to be up like this in a like a stress clench position, often hands on the belly, listening to her clients. She would shift positions, lean one side or the other, and over time she had this right sided shoulder pain that developed on the back side. Okay, So that's like note number one. Then she talked about on the right side, the front of her hip bothering her. And my first mistake was hearing that, or noting the symptom, hearing that she sits for a while. So I immediately thought like, oh, well, hip, like psoas attaches to the femoral head. That's in a sitting position, permanently contracted psoas. So I'm thinking like, oh, okay, front of the right hip, she's sitting. All right, cool. Like we can probably just work the psoas and it'll get better. Like, all right, cool. And then for the back right of the hip, like same kind of thing. Maybe it's just like psoas discomfort presenting there. Maybe it's a little bit of QL. And now understand, I'm just talking about like initial impressions when Wonder Woman presents to the office after crime fighting. So those are like her 3 big issues that she wanted to treat were right shoulder, front right hip, back left hip. And if my references to body parts are like kind of off for like anybody just like audio listening, it's like I'm like whatever. I'll be as clear as I can, I guess is what I'm getting at, but I'm tending to talk with my hands a lot, whatever. So these are the main complaints she comes in with. Now we start treatment assessing ranges of motion, pain levels, like what causes the discomfort, and that's where we start. And we find out it pretty much hurts all the time. She can shift positions. It comes on when she's sleeping. It's just all sorts of bad stuff, right? So let us start with the right shoulder. We'll get to the thigh. For this conversation about modesty, we're not really going to be concerned about the back left hip, actually, just in the sense of my face down hip draping I'm quite comfortable with. I don't think that's a problem. Where we're getting to is the draping for female breast tissue and also like female upper thigh draping. That's ultimately what we're getting through, but we're going to work through not the whole case, but important moments in the case to kind of see where I faltered and what we learned then and how we were able to overcome this. So let's start with the shoulder issue. So we work, especially on like first time massage goers for medical massage, where I'm not trying to make you relax. I'm not trying to hit every area of the body. If you tell me these are your main concerns, it's pretty much pick one, and we're doing 40-20. So first session, I did 40 on the upper shoulders, trying to assess both sides, see if it's like actually on both sides, if there's like damage here, whatever's going on. So we really try and break down the sessions, not wanting to do not wanting to move anywhere else but the primary and we'll say like accessory areas to the issue. So when we're working the shoulders, primary focus right side, but we also want to get a sense of what the base of the skull feels like, what the head feels like, what the neck feels like going down into the shoulders. Is it held up? Is it held back? What are the holding patterns? And what we found with her, because her arms are up like this, there was this going on. So before we can really figure out what's bothering this right side shoulder, there's a lot of just accessory issues that we got to work through before we like find like the true trigger points that are causing like the big issues. Okay, so foreshadowing, what we find out is, and I'm sure you've heard other therapists talk about this, and it's going to hold true in this case, is like where the pain is not where the problem is. Now, that's not 100% universally applicable, but it's just an interesting thought to always have in the back of your mind of thinking like, okay, I understand that they're telling me that the pain is here, but what do we know about referred pain, latent pain? What do we know about insertion points, where that muscle goes, what joints it like acts on, right? These are all things you have to take into account when assessing an issue. Okay, so on first impressions, it would appear as though her issue is just in the infraspinatus. Now, if her issue is just in the infraspinatus, I would want her to tell me that she's always like over rotating her arm, bringing it back. She's got to do like with weight, and she's like, you know, like arm wrestling or something for just her infraspinatus to be the thing that's like damaged, right? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when she says low activity post fighting bad guys. I mean, we're talking about Wonder Woman here, but she was post crime fighting, low activity. Okay, client was describing low activity, so she's not cranking dumbbells, she's not doing anything crazy. So that's like red flag number one. Okay, so eventually we want to get away from that muscle and figure out what else is being held up. Okay, now these are just patterns that happen in like working through, especially like developed issues. Now, I don't know anything about what the literature says about like this stage, that stage, or whatever. There's like, you know, if there's a inciting event, if there's damage, there's going to be the inflammatory period, there's going to be, you know, the healing stages afterwards. But I guess what I'm getting at is when somebody's been doing the same thing for an extended amount of time, we're dealing with like technically like repetitive stress injuries. There are more auxiliary issues that you have to work through before you can actually get to like partial cruxes of issues. Most of the times what we find out is that they're like multivariable. Okay, so we talked about having shoulders out, up, and pressure down, right? Let's say these are stressful conversations. So what we find out is she's going to be putting a lot of pressure here where you're, I'll say up close to like where your lats connect up into, we have your teres minor, teres major in this region. If you go onto the back of the scapula, you hit subscap, which is 1/4 of your rotator cuff of the shoulders. There is a lot of important musculature under the shoulders that gets ignored. Now, this is and has been, I would say, a key element in my practice itself is going to the opposite side and using motion to figure out how much room you actually have. Because what we end up finding out is that infraspinatus on the back of the scapula is sore because it can't move anywhere. And that's where the pain developed too. That's where the line went when all of this is being pressured all day long, where you're just engaging that armpit and pulling shoulders up. You're locking these scapulas. What you have is like, I'm not sure what anybody would call it, but it's like a frozen shoulder that hasn't been in the freezer or something, but you have all of the characteristics of the frozen shoulder. It just hasn't stopped moving yet, but you're damn close. Okay, so Wonder Woman presents with like an almost frozen shoulder. Let's just say it like range of motion limited. Okay, so when you're working, you want to work in a way, and now here's actual useful information. What you want to do is work in a way where now I know we talk about like body mechanics and, you know, straight line pressure and stacking of the joints, and all that is super, super important, and do it when you can. However, there's an element to where that blinds you and removes your possibility for complete information. Now, when we are working with our clients, and I would argue in a lot of things that we do, we want to have as much information as possible when working through an issue, working through an environment, working through a situation. If we have more data to work with, we have more, we'll have more of an understanding that the thing that we're looking at is a horse and not a zebra. Now, bring that just right back to the overall theme of the podcast. Like, we're going to get it wrong a lot if you don't have as much data as possible. Okay, so what am I getting at with this armpits, talking about infraspinatus? It's all related is what I'm saying. Now, her right shoulder discomfort that was presenting on the infraspinatus under the spine of the scapula, intense, deep discomfort all the time. Okay, she's not yamming on it here. So what's that telling us? Is that it can't move anywhere else. So look at the regions around that muscle and around that bone structure that it would have to move into. Okay, so if we know how muscles work, we know it's spindles and fibers that have to like compress on top of each other, right? And slide in and out of each other, which is why we focus on proper hydration, proper stretching. You want to keep those fibers as malleable as possible so they'll slide by each other as easily as we would want them to. Okay, so if you tense up, you clench, you permanently are contracting these muscles, you have lactic acid buildup, which is already uncomfortable, compounds, you stop motion in one direction, but the muscles on the other side that are like overall healthy not being used, what ends up happening to them is they get backed in a corner to where they can't move on either side because the things around them got held up, stuck, and damaged. They're sort of held up, stuck, and damaged, but in a different way. And these are the things that you have to break down and pull apart and figure out about your case is what is hurting, what was the original thing that started to hurt, what like phase of the process are we in. These are all questions that you can ask your client is like, when did this start? How does it start? What do you do on a daily basis? Show me what it looks like. If they're standing, when you're talking to them, they describe a job where they're sitting. It's like, give them a chair, show them, get them to show you exactly how they sit throughout the day, where they're putting pressure points, how they're leaning. You're gonna see something stupid. I promise you, they will give you the dumb thing that they're doing all day long that they're paying you to reveal to them. Okay. So you got to figure out, yeah, oh, okay, you want to work the thing that like hurts them, right? So you want to start there sort of, but understand that note number 2, if you want to be able to put any real pressure on an area, you have to free up the other side to move it into. There, like, you can't like put a rock through a rock, man. It's just not going to happen. So start on the other side, the thing that you got to push that now hurt and sore thing through and into to ultimately stretch it out. Because what are we doing as therapists? We're putting downward force and trying to lengthen these muscles. We're trying to pull them apart. We're trying to break down these knots, right? We're trying to break this stuff down, and you can't pull into an area that is literally not going to move, right? Unless you've pre-prepped it. So now you understand why I'm describing this as like a medical massage podcast. Obviously, there's a lot of ideas here that are just expanded from the basic stuff that you learn. Now, if you're a student just out of school listening to these ideas, like, please pay attention, because you can upgrade your practice in a way where you're working so much more effectively. Like, yeah, you're not just like yamming on the area that they want to, like with a shoulder for 45 minutes and then wondering why it didn't get better. Like, go and free up, go and stretch the other side, pull it apart, feel that you can now move that shoulder into itself. It has more room. And then when you put that insane pressure that your clients want on that hurting area, then it's going to slide off, and then you get that release. Okay, so how do you get release? Open up the other side first. Okay, so when she talks about, now back to Wonder Woman. So, and it tends to be a little all over the place, but understand, like, we're just spinning plates here, right? We're going to introduce this idea. We're going to throw up this idea. We're going to spin these two plates. I'm going to put my foot here. I'm going to get another plate here. And we're just going to be working with these ideas to get through these cases and understand, like, what's going on. All in getting to how did we fail Wonder Woman in relation to modesty. We can say that. Okay, so ultimately, we know that we had to get to the underside of the rotator cuff, teres minor, and subscap that sit under the rib cage, like down in here. You could access it. You can go, if they're face down, you can lift up on the scapula and go under, like with a tough thumb. That's not that well, none of it's comfortable. If you have them face up, get their arm to like 90, slide under. You got to find the meat here, and then you can get in and then back, right? But now we see the crux of the issue is how can we work this area correctively, properly, in a way that it helps, but also doesn't affect modesty, right? So that's where I was kind of lacking. Now, how do we work an area that is it has both sensitive, like actual tissue, like breast tissue is not like it's not as like tough as like muscle or skin, right? It doesn't like to be pressed on as tough as a muscle does. So if you, God forbid, you are working on muscle tissue, it's not going to be fun for the person. Okay, so you want to be safe and you're not like hurting the person, right? And then B, you also don't want to be touching breast tissue during a massage. Okay, so how do we, as a self-conscious male who does not want to broach that subject, maybe it's tough to work comfortably in a session where they are already on the table. You know you have to get there. Maybe you got farther in the session than you thought you would. Basically what I'm saying is you want to set this up before they're on the table, okay? And that is where I failed. In one session, we worked the shoulder free in a way that we were going to be able to work the underarm during that session. Now, I wasn't prepared for getting that far to the degree that I would have wanted to at least talk to her about it or have a strategy to introduce her to the idea. So I end up not working in that area. I went to the hip, or the hip flexors, and then the back left hip, right? We just work other areas that she had issues with, and we figure, okay, we'll deal with that next time. That's a big not cool in the sense of being ill prepared as a therapist and not having set up your client for success and not setting yourself up for success, actually. Okay, so now where I would say the right question for me to ask was, what am I doing wrong, and how can I work better in this area while keeping her comfortable and safe? Okay. Now, you may have learned this in massage school, and I did too, but there's an element of discomfort that comes with like broaching the subject and talking about it with the person. So there's a question of self-confidence that has to be broached as well. You have to be ready to talk about this kind of stuff with your clients if you really want to help them, if you really want to get them through this issue. So with Wonder Woman, I had to learn to talk to her before the session, set her up for the kind of work that we were going to be doing in the underarm, and help her understand that, hey, I'm not trying to touch your breast tissue. I explain the issue medically. I have a chart in my office that's, it's just like the just muscle and skeleton, like with the skin peeled back and whatever, and just like the reference points to the muscles and tendons and whatever. So you can clearly illustrate and show to your client, like, hey, this is where I'm working. Point on the image, point right here, say like, oh, like this is right where we're going to be. You can demonstrate the motion. This is what we want to work with. So when you're talking about like pin and stretch techniques, having them do active motion, like pressing on things or letting pressure go backwards, whatever that wasn't going to help anything. That was a bad example. But whatever strategies you're going to use to treat the area, you have to set up your clients to be ready for that kind of work to be done, right? You don't just want to be like just diving in there. It's kind of creepy. Okay. So you ask the client, and this is what I learned to do. This is what I'm saying is a great strategy, is you ask the client under the sheets, having them fully covered up, to reach up with their hand and pull their breast tissue to the midline so they bring it up off of the rib cage and away, so you have access to the musculature that sits under. So like the lateral most fibers of pec major, kind of the line that sits right along the rib cage there. You can hit at serratus anterior there, that have the fingers that come across the rib cage. And what we end up finding is the connection of the lats way high up, serratus anterior, and the pecs that were sitting right here. And I believe one string of the pec minor fibers also along there. So it's just these, what would that be? Internal rotators, I guess you would call them, is all defunct and all contracted. The shoulders were pulled forward. So what we have to do is work that in a way where we pull it back. But that all had to be done in a way where she was comfortable with her hand pulling her breast tissue towards her midline and getting it out of my way so I could work comfortably and safely on her. Now, where the mistake was not knowing that this was something I was going to have to do. I thought, oh, they'll just understand. It'll just be the way I'm trying to move, and they'll just get it. No, the idea is clear, open lines of communication. Talk to your clients. Let them know what you want to accomplish, why the area that you're working will accomplish that goal. Ask them any question, like, hey, do you have any questions? Can I help explain this any better? There are a lot of routes that you can go to help your clients understand why you need to work in an area that could be sensitive. Okay, so for the shoulders, we had to get over asking her to pull her breast tissue to the midline. We got good access then to serratus anterior, the pectoral muscles that sit that far over. And what we actually ended up finding is that allowed a breakthrough moment on the shoulder. We freed it up. Further investigation finds that a lot of it was actually coming from like deep mouse work. So it was forearm discomfort as well, just a whole arm of problems, but it was only presenting in the shoulder, which, asking the right questions of both myself, what am I doing wrong, and asking questions of the cases, where haven't we looked yet, right? And there's always going to be somewhere, because if you're doing your job well, you just can't hit all the areas that you need to in a way that gives them proper motion, proper relief, and gets them in a stage to begin to take over the healing process that you initiated on the day. Okay, so we get this shoulder moving in a way that both myself and the client are happy with. Wonder Woman was over the moon in her invisible car. So we had to then worry about the front of the hip issue, and that's like that was a whole different thing. That encompassed a bunch of other clients who I would never drape high enough. I always erred on the side of just like, oh, I'll just like rub their knee, I guess, just so, I mean, really, really always erring on the side of caution, working over the sheet a lot of the time. But what we end up finding is that leaves you limited to massage strokes, having not proper like vision, but there's something about skin to skin that just works really well for massage. We want to have clean lines for forearm pressure, and for the big quad muscles that are 2-3 layers deep of large muscles, you want to be able to use more pressure than just like your little thumbs just, running in there. And that's what I was doing and calling that work. And that's like big failure number 2 for the case, is not being comfortable enough draping in a way that was going to get these clients like good actual work. Okay, so what did we do? For the hip flexor, we started with the psoas because we thought, wow, she's sitting, it's probably all just, she's probably all just pulling it down, and contracting all in here and whatever. Okay, so we thought it was really the psoas. And understand that when we hit each of these areas, like, we were always partially right. Like, we made headway enough on qualities of pain, duration of pain, and just like all just like the normal markers of, am I doing a good job? And we were hitting all of the boxes to like a significant degree. She was noting multiple days of relief with like some days of soreness after, or not some days, but like some periods of soreness afterwards, she would note. And hey, like, fair enough, like, that's the process, man. But the thing that was frustrating me is the discomforts would always come back in a way that was like the exact same, right? But she was like, but other things are getting better, but it's like still the exact same. Like, okay, so you're obviously missing something, right? So pretty much serratus anterior, and like, yeah, pretty much serratus anterior was key for her in the way that the arm got damaged and hurt, and the way we had released everything else and worked on the sides. Once we got there and hit that, it unlocked the whole thing and we were fine there. But with the hip, it was a different issue, because working in the psoas didn't get us that much, and hip pain was always coming back at night. Sorry, I'm like out of breath or something. It would happen throughout the day, at night, and be just overall detrimental to quality of life. So, like I said, we would make some headway on it, working on, like, the front of the hip, kind of, stretching out the IT band, and, just like, oh, like, curl, and, like, do that kind of stuff. And it was doing fine enough, but like, it wasn't solving the issue until we thought about just having the same kind of conversation with the breast tissue as the draping. You just like put it out in the open, say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with it, so this is what I've done. I've draped improperly. I've given you a bad work, basically. And I think that helps to go in the right direction, is like firstly admitting that you were wrong, and then presenting why you were wrong, and then the new steps that you can take together to push through, right? So with that, I had to just describe to her, like, hey, I'm sure I was not working improperly. We've been missing something there. Like, I went back through the rigmarole of asking her, like, what is, are there any details that I miss? Is there just anything else that you can tell me? And we just weren't able to hit it. So obviously it's got to be like, look at yourself then, right? If she's saying like, no, you're kind of like hitting all the notes, like it feels okay, we blah, 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 because she's not the expert, right? we're the experts, the therapists that our clients are coming to. I'm talking about us as a team, a group of therapists that need to help each other and help our clients overall, right? So they're coming to us as the experts. So if we don't know the information, we got to get the information. You can't just keep having your clients, especially when you're doing therapeutic or medical work with them and you're not getting these results. You have to figure out why you're not getting the results and figure out what can change to get those desired results. Obviously, make sure client goals and therapist goals are aligned. Like, what they want you to be working on and what they want out of these sessions. That's a super strong place to start. It goes back to asking good questions. But back to the hip problem for Wonder Woman is we weren't doing it, man. We weren't hitting 100% pain relief. We were only getting like 80% pain relief like 75% of the time. So we had to ask then, it must be the draping, right? It's got to be the draping. We got to be able to work higher, deeper, and in a way that is safe and comfortable for them. So once again, I broached the topic. I said, hey, I'm not draping right. Let's do this together, and let's work in this area. I think it could be this muscle group. We'll work with these type of actions. I want to use forearm, elbow on the like main quad muscle and like flank, things that are rotating outwards, right? And when we had that conversation and then in that session work in a way that we noted significant difference in session, post-session conversation. So noted everywhere that we were hitting in that little region at the top of the hip, incorporating the, I don't want to point improperly, but the TFL on the side of the hip, the ones that wrap down in front, before you hit the pelvic bone, working that area in a way while also focusing mainly on the top of the quads, and it's like, corner region of the hip, in a deep and focused manner, hitting rec fem and the muscles that lie directly under there. What we found was large knots at the top of these like very big bellied muscles. Now, we didn't even know they existed. We weren't working deep enough, and what we found was deep pressure to her saying like, oh, that's a spot. What do we know, man? Go lean into that feeling, because the places that don't hurt, there's not a problem, right? So we got just immediate payoff that we were working now properly. So with that session, we were able to break through a big discomfort of mine as a therapist to get clients better sessions and better work done when these more sensitive areas are involved, especially with female clients. Now, the same thing applies to male clients as well. Like, obviously you get the freedom of the pectorals, but the pelvic groin area is still like just as much of a concern. So this doesn't go, male clients or whatever. It's everybody deserves this respect and care put into the sessions. This one just happens to be with a female. Now, that work contributed to much better objective results and subjective results for the client, which would not have been gained if it had not been for pressing both her for maybe a rediscovery of old information and patience with me, and hearing, I guess, like the sincerity of the apology, because I do believe if you're doing bad work for somebody unknowingly, you know, like the other work I was doing was getting some results, but at a certain point it wasn't enough, and then you realize like, okay, so we freed up those other areas, but we're still missing an element. There's some amount of time where you've done the right amount of work elsewhere, and now you should have been somewhere else, but you weren't for whatever reasons you believe in your treatment path. And like that's okay. Like we don't really know what we don't know, and that's okay as long as we're keeping our eyes and our ears open and speaking what we know to be the truth to our clients, as much of it as possible. And then you're going to be about as close as you can to getting the right answers if you're setting all of that up beforehand. Okay, so we got good results out of Wonder Woman's shoulder and front of the hip due to not having the confidence to work in those areas properly previously, and then working through that and coming out on the other side having, what would you say, having followed the inkling properly, where you said like, hey, I must be doing something wrong. You checked again, and then, yeah, you find out you were doing something wrong. Hey, good for you. Don't condemn yourself for having been wrong. You know, lift yourself up for working together with your client to then like get the right answer. And this may be, you know, not as much of a used thing. I don't know how much other therapists are doing it, but like, congratulate your clients, man. Tell them that they're doing good work. Every time I'm on a spot that's like, that I know is sore, that like I can feel is more tender or producing maybe a sharp or this or that kind of sensation, thank them, ask them to breathe, tell them that they're doing a great job, and like, hey, I'm with you, I know what that feels like. Describe to them like, oh, yep, I gotcha, cool. Take a deep breath in and out. Just, you know, do the mother hand, show them, take your other hand off, say, hey, no pressure, just breath in and out, cool, and then you can get back to the work. There's no reason you can't give them a little bit of a break, a pat on the back, and say like, hey, this is really fucking hard work, so kudos for like being able to get it done. I tell this to my clients all the time. Look, hey, I know you're thanking me for like just applying motion to your body, but at the end of the day, it's like you're doing it. You're the one that's sitting here for an hour taking my, when I, you know, people like to make the abuse joke, but like they do, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good overall when you're doing like the really tough stuff, right? You can milk your way through an issue over the course of like months and actual years of just like, okay, a little bit of hurt here, a little bit of that there. You're never going to get it done. You can do really deep work correctively, safely. And that's combining breath and pause and ice during a session if you need to. Like these are all things that I hope if you're here, you've at least begun to work into your practice or want to work in and learn how to. Because this is an interesting element. So the like table side manner is super important. Your clients aren't going to want to work through this if you're like, if you press on a spot and you're like, oh yeah, that feels good, doesn't it? And it like actively hurts. You want to be there with your clients. Like they say, positive regard, man. Just congratulate them. Say good for you, because it's them at the end of the day. And this goes back to the idea of safety and modesty for your clients. Make them a part of it. Make them safe in the process of healing them. So overall, I think that's like what would you say, like the theme of the week has been. You know, we see these clients regularly. So that has been something that I've been working through in my practice with my clients, where I'm learning to get better work done, having these tough conversations and turning the lens on myself and saying like, yeah, there's no way I'm doing this shit perfectly. If you can like actively see those things that you're doing in your own practice, and And once you identify an issue and let it continue, that's willful blindness to something that could be causing active harm to your clients. And you may ask, like, oh, well, that's weird. Like, how could, like, erring on the side of caution be hurting your clients? Well, because they're paying for your service, and, like, you kind of know what you should be doing, but you don't, because you don't want to have the conversation. You don't want to make it awkward. You don't want to blah, 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 blah. There are so many excuses that you could lay out that, yeah, whatever. I could have draped like that for the rest of my life and never got like good upper thigh work done, and never like actually learned about it, never care about the quads. Like, oh, I'll just stretch them and fucking hope it's the psoas. Like, oh, that's not where you want to be. So learn how to talk to your clients, learn how to turn that lens on yourself, because eventually the clients will have told you everything that they know, and then it's going to be up to you to figure out what's not coming up too liquid, too useful. Okay, so the I guess note that I would like to end on is just think about what would make you uncomfortable in those situations. And well, I guess it would just be simply like treat others how you would want to be treated. Like I'm so much more receptive to somebody if like they're just kind of open with their I don't want to say like buffoonery, but like open with their flaws. Like, oh, hey, this is, like only my first or second time doing this, blah, 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 blah. Like, I can totally vibe with that, and it endears you to them. So don't think that's what I was trying to get to. So don't think that your clients are going to be like, oh, maybe it's not for me. Like, if you're able to share your clients like true like knowledge growth and intent to like make a thing better, they're just going to like you even more if they've already been with you in this and that. But also understand that you have to apply these concepts very early when working with people who they were only going to ever give you one session, right? Like, you may lose them on that first time if you were like, oh, well, we'll save that for the next one. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. You got to learn how to smooth all of this into your practice to make every single person feel comfortable, no matter how many times you've seen them. And that was part of the mistake, is I'd let it go too long. So these are just things to think about when working with your clients, and things that you can do to just help them just feel more comfortable and safe. Now, looking ahead, I do believe the next episode of Push and Pull will be the week of the 20th, planning for my first guest interview. She's a client that we'll have on, and we'll see what kind of interesting conversation we can have with her. Now, like I said, that's going to be a little farther out, so please follow the Twitter for all the information. That's where we put all of our updates, what's going on. So that is at Tall and Short of One. That's they're the producers for the show. If you watch the Tall and Short of It weekly, talk about F1, all these other things. At Tall and Short of One for all the latest info. It's going to be week of the 20th. We'll have our first guest on. Now, again, I would just like to thank everybody so much for spending your time here. Hopefully these are useful thoughts. Hopefully these are useful ideas where you can see where I went wrong and maybe learn a thing or two about how you can make a nice step in the right direction. Now, again, like I said, just thank you so much for listening. Hope this has been useful. Again, I'm Justin with Push and Pull. This is a medical massage podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.